Good morning, friends. Word of God, OBE Journal 2017, number 14. Consciousness projection. Live to air, as they say these days. My desire, conscious desire, was to go to a fairly high astral plane and talk to the beings who lived there, but I seem to have been redirected. And I'm not blaming anyone for this. It must be my own inner guidance that I wasn't consciously aware of, but I seem to be in one of the cities in Syria that has been fought over right now, where the ISIS forces are being slowly decimated and control less and less area. And what are we calling them? The coalition forces. The Iraqis are aided by certainly American firepower, perhaps others too, and special forces. It's close street to street fighting here, as far as I can tell. And I'm in some kind of a basement of a building. Unseen. Not pleasant. But that's the vibration. I mean, not pleasant. I mean, I'm not physically there. I'm just spiritually there. Sort of lull in the fighting, a brief lull. Weapons getting reloaded. Small amounts of food being consumed, little bits of bread and water. At least two guys are praying, not so like formally, but they sense some kind of an end is near, although there's far from surrender. There will be no surrender for these people. And dying for their cause is the noble thing to do, obviously. Sort of tuning into the various mental vibrations of the guys that are there in that building. At least one of them is thinking of the couple of comrades, friends who have been, quietly evacuated. People have been sneaking out of the city in various ways to regroup elsewhere, to go underground, to continue on the battle by other means, perhaps by raiding, bombing activity elsewhere, the sort of thing we've been starting to see. Moving to another front. I don't know if Yemen is another front. I'm not particularly knowledgeable in these matters. One civil war is just as bad as another, as far as I'm concerned. And I'm not a military historian. I read what I read in the papers and then, forget the details, as a lot of us do. But the chap who's thinking about this is wishing he had gone. When he had the chance, he chose to stay, was offered the chance to stay to fight to the end, and is now thinking the smart choice would have been to go and fight longer elsewhere. I think there's even some kind of a tunnel out of this building that would get them maybe only a couple of blocks away. But he's thinking about that, but then wondering if that will, lead him to a slightly safer space, and then he's doubting that. What kind of weaponry do they have? Well, I'm not very good at that sort of thing. I dare say there's grenades and automatic weapons. You have a few knives stuck in belts, that's for sure. That seems to be slightly irrelevant to my quest here, if I have a quest. I think morally just to represent the type of soul that is engaged in this activity, young souls who feel that fighting for a cause for which they're willing to give their lives is, the noblest, the greatest thing that a human being can do. Tying yourself to the ideology of an outlook, whether it be political or religious. Fighting to the end for that cause. And, as we've discussed before, there are a certain level of soul evolution that can be seen as the greatest thing to do, the most meaningful activity. And sometimes it's a political ideology, and sometimes it's religious. theocratic. And there's always God figures, deity figures, prophet figures that are seen at the head of these causes, these ideological causes. And of course, there are other, professional mercenary type fighters who have always existed and exist in this conflict in Syria. And they, of course, have a different view. They're been at this a long while. They go from conflict to conflict and, turn a good buck, as they say. And they do get wrapped up in the lifestyle for sure, and no other way of life, and cannot really retire. And when they do retire, they take that vibe with them, and they can't really settle. There's a few can settle, but not many. They wind up being a professional soldier elsewhere, or a hitman, or something like that, or at the very least get involved in protection services or in some kind of security service, or the seemingly innumerable support services for security services, where they will, dirty deeds done cheap sort of thing. And it's a dead end sort of path spiritually, but it takes them a long while to realize that. And but it's not the only thing in our planet. Was a sort of a spiritually dead end path that leads you down a dark ladder till you're in a completely darkened, quote unquote, basement, not the real basement I'm in now, but a spiritual basement where there's no exit, or seemingly no exit. Getting very dry here. So in this basement where they're sort of hiding, but there's, they can move up to a ground level room and shoot out various windows. And I guess there's a lull, so they're down there. And but the shelling and shooting are only blocks away at this point. And so they're just taking a rest, getting ready for the next lunge of activity. And while death is staring them in the face, they're outnumbered, outgunned, and out everything else. They feel it's just a matter of time. There's not a sense of fear or desperation. There's a sense of mission, a sense of glorious mission, a sense of not even dying. I mean, these people don't think about dying, they think about transition to paradise. And they've been, allowed themselves to be hypnotized by this, as all true believers do. They're not, they have given permission to be hypnotized. But I mean, we all do that in one way or another, whatever belief system we follow. And of course, I'm not comparing your belief system of good citizenship and devotion to family or career or all that sort of thing to the dastardly sort of deeds that these folks get up to. But it is, they're still belief systems. And the whole notion of self-hypnosis into a belief system where you insert yourself over the years and become an actor in that belief system, become a cog in that machine. The process is the same. there's always doubts that go along with it. Am I doing the right thing? Is this worthwhile? Am I fooling myself? And then so the doubts will fade away, but they're there. And I sense, a few little doubts in these minds around me now. Again, I seem to be a sort of a ghost figure. They don't sense that I'm there. I mean, I could work toward a manifestation, but that doesn't seem particularly desirable or useful here. Um, um, and there's certainly enough, some spirits, ghost type spirits of the recently dead in the conflict around. I don't think there's any in this room, but I'm not going to retrieve those people. That's maybe, well, I might later on, but that wasn't my particular intention. And on other occasions, it's only the ones that have that are peppered with doubts in their acceptance of that fanatical ideology with all its sort of strict rules of behavior and what's going to happen and what's not going to happen, and a fair bit of transitioning, fairly quick transitioning to the imagined and desired paradise worlds that they've been promised and hooked onto. And again, there's many warrior type tribes and nations throughout history have similar patterns. Their own specific paradise world, which they've been promised and which they go to after showing courage and in the cause, shall we say. And the cause is always unbelievably righteous and supersedes all other causes, and is definitely the place to be and the thing to do. And you can quote, I guess the obvious example to a European bred soul like me is the Vikings, but there's plenty of others. They're often used as a metaphor, and they're appropriate enough. They were brave and adventurous and merciless when they felt it was the right thing to do, and they often did. Conquering was what it was all about. And they did it in a very physical, straightforward manner. Other tribes and nations developed more sophisticated ways to conquer. And later on, various European nations developed that, the various empires. And that was the long haul, the initial military thrust, followed by the economic entanglement with whatever natives were in the land that was conquered, and the establishment of another sort of series of trading posts that turned into the opening bureaucracies for the extended fingers of empire. That's another process. I think ISIS kind of fancied themselves on that front, 2 or 3 years ago. The dreams of the caliphate, etc. They were grossly, of course, mistaken. The forces that reigned against them were perhaps a little slow to action, as the Goliath figures often are, when there's a lot of shall we say, forces to be awakened and put into action. But there was never a chance that they were ever going to succeed at this. But as souls given free will, as we all are, they did not listen. Well, to our viewpoint, they did not listen to the better angels of their nature, but the other ones. But from their viewpoint, they listen to the right angels. And that's the whole polarity of this madness that we seem to get continually caught up in as a planet. I don't mean as you and me. This notion that there is an enemy, always enemies to be overcome in order for a vision to be attained, to put it simply. And I don't think that's overly simplified. The notion, duality involves that. The righteous way to do something, the wrong way to live, and those who claim righteousness will enforce their righteousness upon others because they're stuck in a polarity of good and evil, right and wrong, and holiness and lack of holiness. Diversity is not tolerated, and as we know, diversity is actually the game. The embracing of diversity on all fronts is the game. Whether you particularly like what you embrace or not. Diversity is where it's where we are and where we're headed and our destination. And I think a lot of you know this, but I'll remind you of it. That diversity extent. I mean, we're working on ethnicities and cultures right now, worldviews, religions, but we're also working on life forms, animals, the plant kingdom, the natural kingdom, embracing them as sentient beings that deserve understanding and respect. Although we're still going to have to eat them for a while, we can't really get around that. And the elemental kingdom, embracing them, whether it be gnomes, elves, fairies, devas, spirits of the fire, salamanders, spirits of the upper air, spirits of water. They're sentient beings too. And beyond that, if you wish to use the term beyond, the visitors, the aliens that have been coming here for quite a long while and are manifesting more and more and tangling with us on a fairly deep level, including DNA. They have to be embraced too. Another aspect of diversity. We're all in this together, and we're all life forms seeking fulfillment, expression, greater knowledge of ourselves, greater knowledge of others. That divine understanding that we assume God or the gods have. And they do. And as we struggle and wiggle towards that from our various levels, we have these challenges. And obviously these ISIS guys have serious challenges because they won't accept much diversity at all. What they accept is the vision given to them by the philosophy, the ideology, the leaders. One way to lead existence, one goal in life, one attitude to have. We're right and you're wrong, and you will convert to our ways or die. And again, this is nothing new. It's happened in the various cycles of history. Convert to our ways or die. Forced conversion, I guess, would be the historical term. And Muslims doing it to Christians and Christians doing it to Muslims on a simpler level. There's obviously other religious ideological conflicts other than the Christian and the Muslim one, but we do seem to be confronted with that one now, and also the schism within the Muslims, um, hating, despising each other and bombing each other in, in prayer, which is, well, you can't get much lower than that. And uh, you know, all that world. And so I'm seeing these ISIS guys getting ready to transition and sacrificing what they see as a meaningless little self in order to gain a glorious greater self in paradise, and being sort of blessed by their deity figures for doing so, and blessed and rewarded, of course. You know, the rewards are big time, you know. And certainly the rewards as we've been given them, or not given them, discussed by our media, Western media, do seem rather sort of materialist, you know. Worship, um, virginal sacrifice, uh, uh, beautiful surroundings, endless, wonderful food, you know. It's a very, very primitive concept of paradise. Um, and we in the West, who lead fairly good lives, we have a lot of that anyway. You know, I'm not surrounded by willing virgins, that's for sure. But in the West, if you've got the attitude and a little bit of money, you can certainly be serviced in that way, by willing young women who will do the whole 9 yards for the money, you know, and you know, staying in hotels, lovely food, resorts, yada yada yada. It's a, you know, it's not. I don't see it being that much different. And we obviously we know from stats and, you know, the billions spent on this, the billions spent on that, trafficking, drugs. You know, there's a lot of that going on, while the rest of us get up in the morning and go to work, and, you know, have supper and a beer when we come home. Um, but I just sort of make that comparison. So it struck me as slightly amusing, and bleeds into this notion that what tied into the metaphor of television and the internet, third world, you know, deprived people in the third world, all they want really is, through the images of advertising, some of the lifestyle that we have every day. And that's a persuasive argument in itself. Um, and but you know, you start analyzing, you get into the control mechanisms, the belief systems that control these people, and tell them what's possible and what's not possible. And the economies do seem weak, favoring the elites in the, you know, the petrodollar countries. And I've heard from various immigrants and refugees that are in my life, one way or another, that a lot of these Middle Eastern countries, it's nearly impossible for young people to get ahead. There's not nearly enough work. Therefore, the young men can't get married. Therefore, you know, they certainly can't get laid. And we in the West know how important that is. And the women can't have children. You know, there's no appropriate men that can afford to marry them. Yada yada yada. It breeds tons of discontent, and feeds into the Arab Spring metaphor, and you know, all that sort of a thing. It does seem like the bad planning and carelessness of decaying elites that wish to maintain their own power, but haven't got the brains to do it right, as far as I can see, and you know, engender their own destruction bit by bit, and you know, decay from within, and they see themselves as being gobbled up by the superior forces of the West, or the superior sneakiness of the West, if you like. And certainly the West is, if we're good at anything, it's cunning. But I do see lots of decay from the inside there, lots of it. And historically, that's always how these things crumble, is decay from within. And denying it and facing outwards and saying, those wicked enemies, they're destroying us, and not seeing how they're engendering their own fate by not acting intelligently, by resting on their laurels, not really thinking about the future, saying they are, but not really doing it, just preserving their power structure and their privilege. And to me, that's a natural cycle of growth and decay that all cultures go through. Look at any point in history, you see the same thing happening. So I've gone away from the ISIS guys pausing in the basement here, but as I say, I've been reading some of their thought patterns, and they're revolving around that sort of thing, obviously. There's the one fellow who thought he should have gotten out a couple of days ago and stayed to do the nobler thing, yada, yada, yada. Maybe now it's not so noble. And the other fellow, a couple of other fellows thinking about a few thoughts about the families they left behind, but not much. And it reminds me of hanging out with, spiritually hanging out with members of, religious cults who are always, separated from the family, because they are creating the new family. So they separate them from the blood family, and they do it reasonably successfully. Scientology is particularly good at that, on a smaller scale than 30, 40 years ago, but they can still do it. And convincing them that you're one of the elect, and more special than anyone in your blood family, and you have to leave them behind because they're destined for stupidity and dead-end lives, whereas you're destined for, the eternal rewards of our belief system. And the mindset is similar, although there's obviously a huge difference in the level of violence that is required by the various ideologies in order to accomplish their goals. But I see a similar behavior pattern, thought pattern there. I feel it. And the ISIS guys, I see random, well, maybe not random, but little bits in amongst the anticipation of paradise and the glory of sacrifice, honor, glory, a few thoughts about families left behind, blood families that may not share the radical ideology that the fighters have, mothers, fathers, and trying not to be regretful about that sort of thing, although there are little regretful thoughts creeping in, And I guess it depends on whether the families are secretly proud of what the sons are doing, or were shocked by the sudden departure of a son who maybe left a little cell phone message, or whatever, and nothing else. And we see both cases there. So okay, a different level here. I've moved my vibrations a little, consciously, of course, because at some point I thought it was worthwhile having a go at a sort of confrontation, retrieval, and I was floating around a little bit in the building looking for one of them who had already passed but hadn't shifted. It's a lot of automatic shifting to what they perceive as paradise. And then, but there's doubts, so that the doubts that people have, souls, if you like, hold them back. And I seem to have come across one fellow. He's sitting down, was sitting down, is sitting down in a, thinking things over. He knows. I think he knows he's dead, but he's paralyzed by doubts, as far as I can tell. So I sit down next to him. I'm actually impressed that there's something to sit on. This building's fairly wrecked. I mean, it's not collapsed, but it's, there's things have exploded in here. Sort of staring off into space, as it were, pretty much in the form that he was in when he was affected by an explosion. The rifle propped, the clothes a little tattered but still drawn around him. Oh, I see. He's got a container of water, but it's a thought for him and he doesn't realize it. And that's common enough. People assume, that something should be there and it is, and they don't realize they've created it with their thoughts or desires, if you like. So, sitting down next to him, trying to get his attention. I'm not getting it. And again, as you know, with retrievals, as you either experienced or heard, getting their attention, it can be the major part of the challenge. You have to try and get onto their vibratory level so that they can actually see you. And then even if they can sort of see you, they may choose not to see you. And there's all kinds of little problems here, challenges. I tried various little energy tricks, projecting little images into his imaginative daydreams, if you like. I don't know what you want to call them. Imaginative projections, where he's thinking about the paradise worlds, but unwilling to move in that direction for various I don't know, sense of unworthiness. He wasn't as brave a fighter as he would like to have been. He showed levels of cowardice that it made him ashamed of himself. He hid rather than fought on various occasions. Didn't help a couple of wounded brothers as he might have done, because I think he was just too busy doing other stuff. And they just kind of bled to death beside him. Common enough, but something he was ashamed of. And eventually he sort of looks at me and seems to see something, although I'm not sure what it is he sees. Have I been sent for him? He asks me. Well, there's the telepathic thought, obviously, and again, it's telepathy always seems to appear in your mind as the language that you understand, i.e. Gordon English. So, but one gets used to that with retrieval work. It just seems to happen. And any other retriever who's written about this or blogged about it will tell you so. It's quite miraculous on its own. And okay, there we go. I say, yes, I have been sent for you. And I got some thought about, am I worthy of the journey? Am I worthy of the effort? And I say, yes, you are. You're a brave fighter, and you deserve your reward. And some version of the transition ritual. Okay, I ask him to take my hand, and he's a little perturbed at that, taking another man's hand. Maybe not what he was thinking of. And but we need to do that in order to successfully change vibratory levels. And Okay, he finally, well, I say finally, it didn't take that long to decide. For some reason, whatever I have projected or whatever he perceives as is being trusted. He does not suspect that I am not from his belief system. But that happens a lot in retrievals. If I retrieve if I'm working at even a car accident site around where I live in the Greater Toronto area, I can run into all sorts of people with other belief systems, and they don't know I'm a practicing spiritualist, theosophist, meditator, consciousness projector guy. Um, they might be any number of outlooks. They might be traditional Catholic. They might be Sikh. They might be a materialist that watches television a lot and has seen a few ghost stories, and whose concept of the afterlife is made by that. Yeah, you work with what you're given. So an ISIS guy is just yet another challenge for me. So we're moving. I've got him. He's holding my hand, and I say, okay, close your eyes and focus on the fact that we're going to move to the paradise world of of your comfort zone. Although I'm not sure he understands the notion of a comfort zone. He just hears the word paradise, and he closes his eyes. I affect the transition in the way that I would do just if I was doing it myself, and he, express the intention that he will come with me, and he does. Now, beautiful garden, fountains, trees, flowers, vegetation, paths. A lovely place to be, but you can, I'm experienced enough to know that it has been created, and in the not too distant past. And I see what we're doing here. This is this is a sort of a fake paradise. This has been created by others who wish to show these fighters a slightly different version so that they don't stay locked in the belief system. And it's been created by souls that are spirits who are adept at this sort of a thing. So it's like 9/10 of what they expect. And there's, plenty of thought forms, and or the ability for thought forms to manifest. And it's a subtle understanding what thought forms are. But and it's not just for someone of that kind of radical Muslim faith. And I know mainstream Muslims say this is not what the Quran teaches at all. It's all nonsense. But just let me use that definition for now. And allow me that elasticity for this particular situation. If the soul that's there is expecting a number of gorgeous virgins to do his bidding, his strong expectation or his submission to the belief system, how's that sound, will allow that, his thoughts will create that. And you can actually create the form of another human being who seems like an independent entity and will act as such. And, people from other cultures do it too. It's not just this culture. And certainly people with strong, sublimated, frustrated sexual desires who are still operating on that level when they pass can do this sort of a thing. The numbers aren't there, but they could easily create a couple of willing sexual partners. who aren't actually, dead people enjoying themselves on a certain level of the astral plane, but thought forms. And they can be very convincing. And they can come and go and appear and disappear. And but like many manifestations on the astral with the recently dead, they don't know that it's a thought form. So anyway, this is a place where thought forms of willing virgins can be created, and often are. They're a little robotic, and not as independent as they look, but they're there and they can be manifested by somebody without really any experience at all, and they're temporarily real. So I'm walking around with him, and he's seemingly relaxed a bit, feels that he's arrived at where he has to arrive at, and is letting go of his doubts and his lack of faith in himself, his shame, they're not gone, but he's letting them go because he feels like, well, I'm here now, I should let them go. And he's not talking to me, we're just walking around, and I'm not forcing any kind of an issue. And we sit by a fountain on some chairs, and shaded by some lovely trees, and birds are flying about. There seems to be no other people here, but that doesn't matter. And I ask him how he's feeling, and he nods and smiles and thanks me for servicing him, being being the guide that I am. And I ask him if he's happy to be here and to be left alone to lead his new life. And he looks at me a little nervous, and I don't think he is ready for that. Doesn't answer right away, and I say I could, I tell him I could come back later, that I have other fighters to help, and if he's comfortable there, I will return and be of further assistance to him, and give him some, tips. So he seems sort of slightly more comfortable with that, and I say, that's fine, and I stand up and I bow to him, sort of a gentle, unassuming, not ostentatious bow, and I turn and walk away. I sense that disappearing is, I've done other gigs, maybe not appropriate. So I go around a little corner into some, past the trees, and then I disappear. And that was an interesting experience, and I hope you enjoyed it. And we'll go back maybe tomorrow night or the night after, see how he's doing. And I hope you understand the purpose of this particular experience, that I'm not favoring anybody, and it's just another example of how one operates within belief systems, without prejudice and without any judgmental activity. When I talk to fundamentalist Christians that won't transit to the other world because they have judged themselves unworthy, I talk in an evangelical kind of way that Jesus will welcome you with open arms of unconditional love. And that is indeed true. Jesus will do that, or any of his representatives or disciples, but it represents an attitude, that unconditional love attitude, that no matter how uh, sort of, brain dead and stupid that you've been on earth in your choices, you are welcomed back into the fold of loving humanity by those who have elected themselves to do so in that spirit. And the loving arms, the loving, welcoming arms of Jesus are a specific detail that is true, and it is also representative of an attitude. It's both. And with that thought, I will embrace all you with the loving arms. And until next time, friends, be well and enjoy your explorations, even if they're just little memories. Know that you are expanding at the rate your comfort zone demands or prefers, because you are.